Good morning and welcome to the July 26, 2023 California Broadband Council. I am Leanna Bailey-Crimmins, the Director of the Department of Technology and the Council Chair. I want to first acknowledge Covered California and their team that has allowed us to utilize their facility and had made it so wonderful to be able to work with another sister partner in the state to be able to utilize their boardroom. So thank you very much. We'll go ahead and go to the agenda slide. We have a full agenda today. This includes an executive briefing from the Office of Broadband and Digital Literacy. We also are giving highlights on the Broadband for All initiatives, which include Middle Mile Broadband Initiative, Last Mile. We also will hear progress that we're making related to the Affordable Connectivity Program, and of course, the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act broadband programs and how it relates to the State Digital Equity Plan and the Broadband Equity Access Deployment Plan, also known as BEAD. First order of business is roll call. I'll go ahead and have Ms. Nguyen, if you please review the housekeeping items and also proceed with roll call.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This meeting is being recorded. We will be posting the recording of this meeting, slides, and transcripts to the Broadband for All portal. And a quick housekeeping items to keep in mind. Please select side-by-side speaker mode if you're viewing online for the best viewing experience when slides are shared. Closed captions are available. Please choose CC closed caption on the bottom black toolbar to show subtitle. And when we begin public comment, please use the reaction raise hand button to make sure that you are elevated and that we can call on you and unmute you. And at this time, I will start roll call. So good morning, California Broadband Council members and members of the public. Quick reminder, attendees, we will have time at the end of the meeting for public comment. Presenters, please cue Cole to advance your slides. And committee members, please raise your hand when you wish to speak. The chair will call on you to turn on your mic to ensure comments are heard in both in-person and online. Please note that the camera will pan between wide and close-up angles, so we ask for your patience and understanding as the camera transitions between speakers. And roll call. Director Bailey-Crimmins, Madam Chair. Commissioner Houck.
Here.
Deputy Director Green.
Present.
Director Winkler.
Here.
Chief Deputy Director. Chief Deputy Director Osborne.
Here.
Thank you. Ms. McPeak.
Present.
Deputy Secretary Flores.
Oh, here.
Mr. Chisholm.
Here.
And online, we have Ms. Sarah Smith.
Present.
Mr. Aguayo. No, he is not here, but Madam Chair, Secretary Sider Astari.
Present.
Thank you. Madam Chair, we do have quorum.
Ms. Pepper, we need to make sure Deputy Secretary.
Deputy
Lord.
Secretary Pepper.
Here.
Thank you. Madam Chair, we do have quorum.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nguyen. All right, the first agenda item up is Office of Broadband and Digital Literacy. Scott Adams will provide an executive briefing.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, Broadband Council members and members of the public. I'm Scott Adams. I'm the Deputy Director of the Office of Broadband and Digital Literacy within the Department of Technology. It really is my pleasure to be able to give you a brief update on just some of the work that we've been doing since our last meeting. Can we please go to the next slide? So really at a high level, wanted to focus folks that really the work that we have been doing over the last several years has been tracking the implementation of the action plan, the Broadband for All action plan that this body developed in response to the governor's executive order during the pandemic. And great progress was made on the action plan that we reported out on at the end of this year. And per the work plan that the council had approved in last year's October meeting, a lot of the action plan efforts have been folded into related digital equity and BEAD planning efforts, which have required significant amount of coordination between the Department of Technology, the Public Utilities Commission, many other state agencies, and a whole ecosystem of stakeholders. So we will report out briefly during the update on the Broadband for All plan, but we're pleased to say that progress continues to be made on the action plan, and that many of the efforts that have been outlined in the action plan have been moved forward as part of the planning process we've done on BEAD and digital equity. The next piece is there's been a significant amount of engagement both by our office and the Department of Technology and a number of other state agencies. Again, much of that we've tried to build into the joint planning processes on digital equity and BEAD, which really are representing the next chapters of the Broadband for All program in California. Again, we'll get more into detail there. We're really excited about the work that we've been doing with fellow council members on increasing broadband adoption rates and promoting the affordable connectivity program. I'm going to defer to Council Member McPete to give some key updates about that, but very pleased to see that the state is continuing to do a very good job of enrolling people in that program. And then last but not least, as I mentioned, this year, a lot of our focus has been on preparing the state's digital equity plan, excuse me, in partnership and close cooperation with the Public Utilities Commission and their BEAD planning, and just been really encouraged by the close working relationship we've been able to continue to foster and build with the PUC. And we're going to be excited later on in the meeting to give you a bigger update on more specific elements of those. So Chair Bailey Crimmins, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Do we have any questions from any of the board members? We'll go to the dais first. All right, I see none. Is there any remote members that have questions at this time? All right, thank you very much. So the next agenda item is Broadband for All initiatives. We have quite a lineup here in regards to the update. So we do have Scott Adams that will be providing a Broadband for All update. We also have Mark Monroe that's going to be providing a Middle Mile Initiative, Broadband Initiative update. We are also honored to have Commissioner Hauk from CPUC to give a last mile update, Sonny McPeak on the Affordable Connectivity Program, and we have Laura Sasaki who will provide an FCC ACP outreach grant update. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it, at least that's what my notes say. So if there's a change, let me know. With that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Chair Bailey Crimmins. If we could go to the next slide. As I mentioned, there's been significant work on the Broadband for All action plan, and a lot of the items, a good portion of the short-term items were completed last year. There's a number of long-term items that continue to move forward in a commitment between the Broadband Office, the Broadband Council member entities, and others assigned with responsibilities of the completing action plan items to move those forward. I think we wanted to isolate progress in four main buckets here for you today. And the first, given that Broadband for All is based on the fact that access and availability, affordability, and digital literacy or broadband adoption are all key components of digital equity. The state's Broadband for All program has invested, billions of dollars in infrastructure for both middle mile, the open access middle mile network, and last mile projects that would be funded by CPUC programs or just, the market. And so the Department of Technology continues to work, with the middle mile broadband initiative team, with the California Transportation Agency and the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development to enhance permitting efforts at all levels of government, both on the middle mile and the last mile. And so, as we've reported before, resulted in significant amount of improvements in the state permitting processes for the main permitting entities. The California Natural Resources Agency was really helpful in putting us together and their, subordinate agencies were very helpful in shortening the length it takes to permit for the middle mile. Our staff, in partnership with a number of other entities, has developed a local jurisdiction broadband deployment and permitting playbook. We continue to improve and expand on that and do quarterly meetings with local jurisdictions to advise and share best or smart practices on how to improve permitting to enhance and expedite last mile projects. So a lot of good work is going on there. Action item 16 was really the promotion and tracking of low-cost offers. We'd amended this action item last year to include the Affordable Connectivity Program. Again, there's been a massive statewide mobilization led by Broadband Council members, the California Emerging Technology Fund, the Department of Technology, the PUC, the state libraries, the Department of Education, and a number of other folks that have significantly increased. And both the coalition of folks that are working to promote connection to the Affordable Connectivity Program, but to raise awareness. And there's going to be some really good updates later on that Ms. Wright McPeak is going to speak about. What we wanted to also point out is action item 18 was one about continuing to build and expand on the network of digital inclusion stakeholders in the state that are key partners in the development of the many Broadband for All programs and initiatives, but key partners in implementation. And that's on the infrastructure side, the affordability side, and the adoption side. And, over the last year and a half, we've been able to, engage with and grow the list of folks we are regularly meeting and communicating with about the Broadband for All initiative to an ecosystem of about 5,000 residents, stakeholders, subject matter experts, organizations, and a lot of that has been supported by the joint BEAD and digital equity planning efforts over the last year. Lastly, I wanted to report out that action item 21 directed the Department of Technology to develop a Broadband for All portal that would act as a central repository of information where folks could sort of a one-stop shop, find out information on the different programs and initiatives. Now, each of those may have supporting websites, but we wanted to create one central place where folks could go to get top-line information. We continue to grow and improve the Broadband for All portal. We've created a digital equity planning page with supporting subpages to support that. We continue to hone and refine the public assets that are available for state agencies and local jurisdictions to both find low-cost offers and learn about the Affordable Connectivity Program and get connected, but also a tool that we've worked on with the California Emerging Technology Fund and the Cal State University Chico folks, where we can actually track on a monthly basis the statewide enrollments of the Affordable Connectivity Program in aggregate. And then there's a really nice sortable function there where folks are able to search the enrollment rates by eligible households in each county and each zip code in the state. So a lot of work, but I think those were the 4 things that we wanted to update you on today. And Director Bailey Crimmins, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Are there any questions regarding the Office of Broadband and Digital Literacy update that Mr. Adams just nicely? Obviously, Ms. McPeak.
Madam Chair, Director Bailey Crimmins, it's more a comment, an observation. What you just heard Deputy Director Adams report on with his entire team was in a few minutes a lot of work, and I just want to acknowledge that. It's an amazing amount of effort that has gone into bringing us to this point. And the discipline of looking at each of the action items that are in Broadband for All action plan, many of them were actually in the governor's executive order to begin with. So then they got fleshed out. And I just want to say I'm impressed with the systematic looking at where we are, the accountability. And I will also share with you that the California Broadband Council was actually the brainchild of then State Senator Alex Padilla, now our U.S. Senator. And in talking to Senator Padilla, I've really reported that this has become the forum that he envisioned to begin with. So congratulations to you, your department, for staffing it, to Scott and the team. You just deserve a whole lot of credit.
Thank you, Ms. McPeak. Any other comments? Commissioner Houck.
Yeah, I just want to second the comments of Ms. McPeak. There's been just a tremendous amount of work that's gone into all of these efforts, and the partnership that the PUC has had with CDT has been really amazing. And I know that we've had a lot to do over the last couple of months, that I've personally seen how hard everybody has worked, and just really wanted to join in those comments for everyone that's been working so hard.
Thank you. It does take quite a village. I mean, everyone up here has a role that we are all playing to make it happen. And we talk about the middle mile connectivity, affordability, and kind of where the rubber hits the road is when we get to last mile households and there's literacy and people know how to use it and to be able to change their lives economically from a health perspective and just be able to participate in and with their government. And so we offer a lot of services. So thank you very much for all of your assistance and your partnership, because we can't do it alone. We have to do it together. So thank you. Is there any comments online? All right, we'll go ahead and go to the next update, and that is Mr. Mark Monroe going to provide a broadband middle mile initiative update.
All right. Yes. Good morning, Chair and members. Mark Monroe, Deputy Director for the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative, and pleased to have a chance to come in and provide an update on the project. We've continued to move forward with implementation. I think most of you probably will have read that we received a $73 million grant from the NTIA that's going to go towards funding this initiative, funding this project. And then we also have begun receiving delivery of more than 1,000 miles of fiber and conduit since we last met, as we really move into that, or getting prepared for Caltrans to move into the construction phase here in the months to come. So very excited about that. The key thing I want to report on this morning is relative to the approach to how we're moving forward with implementation of the project. Most will remember that when back in 2021, when we started this, I think initial estimates were in the 8,000, 8,100 mile range for how for the size of the network that we would need. As we worked through it with the Public Utilities Commission, went through their processes and built in resiliency, we developed a map that we released about a year ago that is kind of the ideal map for reaching all of the unserved communities throughout the state. That is 10,000 miles, so 26% longer than originally envisioned. But I think everybody understood at the time that was always, an initial estimate, and that more analysis, the analysis that's been done since was certainly needed. Similarly, as we've gone through the optimization process, we went out to bid last year for construction, to get bids on construction for over half the network. And we received those bids. We've been going through them during the first and second quarter of this year. They go through and look at the various terrains, kind of doing a mile by mile look to identify how much construction will cost. And the outcome of that has been that construction costs appear to be more than 40% higher than what was originally envisioned back in 2021. So some challenges there in terms of both needing more miles, or identifying a longer set of miles that we would ideally like to be able to develop, as well as higher costs for construction. Kind of weighing against that is an effort we did through, it's called an RFI squared, that we've talked about in the past, where we went out to industry to look for any other alternative to that standalone construction. And I think that's where we found that while we're still in negotiations on these deals, it appears that they're going to be significantly more cost effective than construction, and which is really going to allow us to reach to extend the network closer to the 10,000 miles that we had originally wanted to do. At the same time, we found out that more is available. And I think when we looked at some of the initial estimates, I think in terms of existing infrastructure or that could be used, I think there were estimates in the 4,000 mile range being kind of the top of what's available. And so what we're going to see here, we've been able to find even more than that, and even the 4,000 miles was that was what existed. That doesn't mean we could get it for a price that was affordable and that could really meet the needs of Californians in terms of having an affordable open access middle mile. So some of the key updates to the assumptions here. And if we can move to the next slide. As we begin to look at the funding available, look at the updated assumptions that we just talked through, we wanted to look at considerations for how we could best meet the needs that we were targeting, and get to the unserved communities throughout the state. And so we did a segment by segment analysis, just looking at every mile of the network that we wanted. We went through and looked at, how close are we getting to the maximum number of unserved communities? And so did spend a great deal of time and effort looking at both getting to those communities and getting as close to them as possible. And then also building in the resiliency we need for this to be a reliable network. And so at the same time, looked at construction costs, looked at all of the other alternatives to construction that I talked about earlier, and to be able to see, okay, given the resources we have, given all of the data we have, what is the best way to make the funding go as far as possible, and to reach as many of the states unserved and underserved as possible, while still having a resilient network. And so if we can go to the next slide here. So the map here was presented at the Middle Mile Advisory Committee last Friday. This here represents phase one of the network, with the $3.87 billion that we currently have. We estimate we can develop the 8,300 miles that we see here. And we look at how that's composed. We've had discussions in the past. I talk about the alternatives to construction. I think it's a blue or purple here that is made up of approximately 4,500 miles of IRU leases, as well as 1,500 miles of joint construction with industry and 500 miles of purchases, meaning that through those methods, we're able to get 2/3 of the network. And so we're very excited about the progress on that. Those details will be forthcoming as we finalize. While we're in negotiations, we can't go out with more details than this, other than to note that this model does also assume that Caltrans will be building 1,800 miles of the network. And it also assumes that the $73 million grant that the NTIA just received. So This map is, we expect to be posting on our public website as a new layer this next Monday. Next week. So with that, we could move to the second slide. Or the next slide. And the next slide is really references phase 2. So this is, when we look at the 10,000 miles, we look at approximately 1,700 miles that we haven't yet identified resources for. So what we're looking at here as we move to construction, and we'll be doing work authorizations with Caltrans in the next month or two to really start construction. But as we move to construction, we're working with the contractors to be able to identify what kind of design changes we might make, and reducing the number of conduits, limiting the depth in some cases of the trench. There are different components, different ways to go about the project that really we're hoping to generate some savings. Those savings will be then immediately moved to phase 2. And similarly, as we look at some of the last mile funding, there's room in there to be used for essential middle mile to help some of these communities get back to the state's middle mile. And so that I think that's broadly been envisioned. And so as applications are considered there, I think that's another potential opportunity for applicants to build in some of that essential middle mile as part of their application to be able to get back to the state system. And then obviously we'd be looking for any sort of future funding sources, and we'll be exploring those with the legislature as well. So with that kind of provides the update on the MMBI and the new phased approach, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Monroe. I'd also like to acknowledge Mr. Emmanuel Aguio, who is representing Assembly Member Gibson today. So we want to make sure that for the roll call, he's shown up there. So thank you very much. So any members that have questions, I see Ms. McPeak, if you have a question or a comment you'd like to make.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me also begin by saying, well, while I've been addressing the deputy directors, there's also obviously a director who has to oversee all this. So thank you for your leadership and the agency and Secretary Tong and the work that's being done. I want to just sort of revisit comments I've made to Deputy Director Monroe in the past meetings of this year, to commend you on taking this approach and going out on the open, if you will, proposal call for competition. There is limited resources. California is a very big state. There's lots of areas to get to, and it's not easy to navigate all of the considerations. So first of all, I want to commend you. Also, I'm very cognizant of the commitment that you, the department, the administration has to quality service everywhere. And while there is the consideration between new builds and using fiber that exists, what I want to do is invite you to comment on how you are assuring the quality service when using legacy fiber. I think that's a pretty important issue that is being asked about in many communities, and you should have the opportunity to actually underscore what you are doing to assure that there will be quality service everywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that question. So we, when we developed the network and kind of designed it for construction, we have a standard. Our goal really is to have an equitable network across the state. And so we designed the network for construction with 288 count fiber, for example. And we designed it with the ability to access it at 2 points every mile. And so I think it's every 24, every 2,500 feet. That has been our standard approach for construction. As we've gone out to work with and negotiate with potential partners on these alternative methods, then that's the same take we've taken, is how can we make sure that regardless of how we're providing the network, that everybody's getting the same infrastructure. And so as we move forward, we are in our negotiations, that is something that's been a key point that we're trying to reach, right? We go in, we want open access. And we go in, we need the same level of frequency, the same amount of fiber. And so I think, that's, I can't go into, kind of final commitments on what those negotiations will yield. We feel very confident that we're in a good position there, given the scope of the project, to be able to largely achieve those goals. And so that's really our intent, is that whether I'm in Oakland or out in the desert or up in the mountains, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter in terms of my access to be able to get to any community's ability to access, whether it's convenient and affordable. And they should be getting the same quality and the same quantity of fiber as everybody else will be getting.
If I just might comment, that was my understanding. I really think it's important to, at least in this forum, also have it on the record. And what I also heard, although you're in the middle of negotiations, I'll just express my opinion and approach on these things from the past and working in government, is build into the contracts, into the agreements, performance standards that ensure that on an ongoing basis that Californians have access to the quality service you just described.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McPeak. Any other members in the room that on the dais that have a question? Are there any members on remotely? Okay.
Yes, actually I did have.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
So yeah, I did just to the note of ensuring similar quality, similar capacity, similar service on the middle mile note, that as part of the budget, there was a requirement that middle mile, where available, provide similar service benefits as anything leased should provide similar service benefits to what is built or joint built. It's more of a comment, and we're talking about arranging service agreements, that there is an item that is in statute that requires, where available, for this leased facility to provide similar capacity, similar speeds.
Thank you, Ms. Smith, for the reminder. Yes, definitely the same up high speed, and maybe you can commit. Was it 10 or 30? What was the speed with which was in that we have to make sure that we're doing equal to what the commercial market is? Do you guys remember, Mr. Adams or Mr.?
So I believe in statute it was the 120, but I don't think we're not going to have a problem with the speed when it comes to the middle mile. I think that was largely targeted towards a lot of the varying degrees that last mile providers might opt for. But in terms of the system we're developing, it will take anything.
Thank you, Mr. Monroe. Another question that I have is regarding one of our focuses has also been labor and working with Caltrans. Can you explain to us regarding construction for the state? Is there any labor considerations? I know that's been a target and a goal for us, making sure that as this is an unprecedented investment into the state, how we're making sure that the communities benefit, but also the labor workforce benefits as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. So, according to state labor standards and state law, as well as the priorities for the administration, all of any improvements being made, regardless of who's making them, the prevailing wage rules, the apprenticeship rules all apply. And I think that's a really important point that we want everybody to understand. So appreciate the question. So obviously when Caltrans goes out and builds, that's prevailing wage rules apply, but the same applies for if we're doing a joint build, or if we're doing a lease where new equipment is being put in specifically for us. And so as is something that we're envisioning in some of the cases. So any improvements to the network, regardless of who's making them, the state's labor standards still apply.
Thank you, Mr. Monroe. All right, any questions? We'll go to the next agenda item. That is broadband adoption and affordable connectivity program from the California Emerging Technology Fund, Ms. Sunny McPeak. Oh, do I have it out of order? Okay. Okay, I'm sorry, Darcy.
Yeah,
Okay.
I always will defer to the commissioner.
Our commissioner for last mile updates for Commissioner Howe.
Happy to go wherever you need, whatever order you. Thank you again, Darcy Hauk. I'm the lead commissioner at the California Public Utilities Commission for our CASF and BEAD proceedings. And again, before I provide our update on the last mile efforts, I just again want to thank and recognize all the hard work that everybody's done from CDT, from CETF and NTIA and our staff at the PUC. I just can't tell you how much work has been happening over the last several months and how much response we've received from local, tribal, and community-based organizations, which just really underscores the need to get people connected and ensure that we're able to meet the mission for broadband for all. It has just been very obvious that this is something that is absolutely needed to ensure people are able to be connected for school, work, healthcare, and just the engagement that we've had and has just been really telling to that, and just wanted to underscore that. And I know we're going to hear more about that later from Deputy Director Adams and Deputy Director Ellis. But again, wanted to recognize all of the work that has been happening, especially Deputy Director Adams, Deputy Director Monroe, and Deputy Director Ellis at the PUC. So with that, I'm going to start providing our update on our last mile programs, and thank you. So the first item I'm going to talk about is our local area technical assistance program, which set aside $50 million for local and tribal governments to facilitate last mile broadband infrastructure projects. The money is intended to support local agencies and tribal efforts to expand broadband to families and communities lacking sufficient internet access. And there was $45 million available generally and a $5 million set aside for tribal nations. The applications we've received to date, or through June of 2023, we received 126 applications requesting $56.6 million. 101 grants were awarded for a total of $47.6 million. We are currently no longer accepting applications because all funds have been either fully subscribed or requested. I do want to note that we do still have a tribal technical assistance account that is offered through a different funding source through the CASF, which is separate than the local technical assistance program. And that is still available for tribes and is $150,000 per tribe per year. I would also, just if anyone wants more information on the program or any of the individual grants, please go to our website. We have a dashboard set up that provides information on the grant applications and awards, and it's updated every Friday. And then just really want to underscore the importance of this program, the high demand that we have, and how this illustrates the interest of local and tribal governments in providing broadband services and the need for this kind of assistance to ensure that low-income, rural, and tribal communities are able to eliminate the digital divide. Again, just the interest in this program has been tremendous, and it's really provided needed resources to assist local and tribal entities in preparing for applications for our other programs. So next slide. So our federal funding account. This account is one of the major accounts that we have for our last mile federal funding, and it provides roughly $2 billion for last mile projects to unserved communities. I'm very pleased to report that we are accepting applications as of June 30th. The portal has been opened for the first window of applications, and encourage you to go to our website and look at the portal. There are 3 steps to applying. The design project design project in the applicant application tool online, then you need to complete the application in our broadband grant portal. And then the date for submitting for this first window is September 29th at 4 p.m. So I just want to repeat that date, September 29th at 4 p.m. And this program, eligible locations are those which lack a reliable wireline connection capable of 25 megabits download and 3 megabits upload. Additionally, the federal funding account projects must provide speeds of up to 100 megabytes download and upload. Entities that are eligible for funding include facilities-based broadband providers, local government agencies, electric utilities, nonprofit organizations, and entities with a certificate of public convenience and necessity in telecommunications, and cooperatives and California tribal nations, including wholly owned tribal corporations and nonprofit organizations. Applicants proposing to connect back to the state middle mile will be required to consult with the California Department of Technology to ensure that the projects align. And there is also a point allocation within the scoring rubric for connection to the state middle mile. Again, the steps to apply for the FFA are listed on the slide. It's a 3-step process. And I again just want to mention the September 29th date. We anticipate awarding grants sometime in first quarter of 2024, and then a second application window will also be opening the first quarter of 2024, and there will also be additional application windows that are consistent with what's been set out in the state budget. We encourage anyone that's interested to sign up for program updates on the CPUC's website. And the link for signing up is here on this slide. And then there's also a link for more information. And I do understand that these slides are publicly available. They're going to be on the website. So please use those resources. And there's also information on who to contact if you need additional information. Next slide. Again, slides are being made public, and this slide has additional links to our program resources for the federal funding account webpage, the applicant tool registration, the broadband grant portal, video demonstration portal, and our webinar recording for prospective applicants. And then there's an example snapshot of a portion of the FFA public map that displays unserved locations eligible for the project account. And again, these items and other resources can be found on the CPUC's application resource page, the link to which can be found at the top right portion of the federal funding account webpage. So there's plenty of resources on our website. And then if you need additional information, there's also contact information there as well. Next slide. So the California Advanced Services Fund continues to serve as an important tool in supporting digital equity and the goals of the broadband for all. Last year, the CPUC adopted new rules for the broadband adoption account and the regional broadband consortia account. We also updated the CASF infrastructure account to implement legislation regarding project eligibility and performance criteria. This year, the Commission is exploring ways to enhance the public housing account by making it accessible for low-income housing developments and mobile home parks with low-income residents. Last year, we also provided updates to it that made farm worker housing eligible for the program, and that's in effect now. Our adoption grants are to public entities and community-based organizations for digital literacy and broadband access projects. The PUC awarded 32 projects, $2.72 million from the January 2023 cycle. And in the July 1 application cycle, we received 87 applications requesting $14.24 million. And our infrastructure grant, this grant provides subsidies for the cost of last mile and middle mile infrastructure to expand high quality communication services throughout California. On June 1st, we received 73 applications requesting $527 million for the grant program. Our public housing and low-income community grants are designed to build networks offering free service for low-income residents in communities such as public housing developments, farm worker housing, and mobile home parks. 34 awards were made from the January 2023 cycle, totaling $1.52 million. And on July 1, we received 14 applications requesting $875,255. Next slide. So this slide, again, it provides an overview of or snapshot of our current broadband investment last mile initiatives. And while the technical assistance is fully subscribed, we still have the upcoming funding available in the Loan Loss Reserve Fund, which we are hoping to finalize by the end of this year. We have our federal funding account, which I discussed and is opened and accepting applications now, and our other California Advanced Services funds, where I just walked through the updates there. We encourage anyone interested in these programs to reach out to our staff, go to our website, and let us know if you have any additional questions about applying for funding. I also want to note, as we stated at the last Broadband Council meeting, that the CPUC has opened the speed rulemaking, and there'll be updates on that later from Deputy Director Ellis. But we are moving forward with changes. We have, again, lots of interest, and these are the current updates we have for our last mile programs. So any questions, I'm available to answer.
Thank you, Commissioner Houck. Are there any questions from the dais?
I
Yes,
have
yes,
one.
Ms. McPeak.
You'd be disappointed, Madam Chair, if I didn't ask a question. So to Commissioner Houck, in terms of the applications you received, I was trying to do the math. It seems like there is a huge demand for the California Advanced Services Fund in all of the buckets, so all of the accounts. Is that impression accurate? It seems like you're oversubscribed, that there really is a need. I'm just interested in your assessment.
Yeah, yes, there's definitely an interest and a need for the CISF.
Thank you, Ms. McPeak. Any other questions from any members from the dais? I see none. We do have one for remote. Ms. Smith?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to get a sense for the LATA funds, the local agency technical assistance funds. Do you guys happen to know like what percentage of those grants that were approved or were provided then turned into applications? Is it too early to tell because it's FFA?
Yeah, we just opened the application portal for the FFA on June 30th. So I believe it's probably too early to see which of those applications, I don't know, and I don't know if Deputy Director Ellis has additional information, but I would guess we don't have that information at this point. We will, though, as we get more applications in and are reviewing them. And I know that we've had lots of meetings and consultations from LATA grantees asking about information for the FFA and our other programs. So I anticipate that we'll see a good number of grant applications from those awardees.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Any other questions? I see none, so we'll go ahead and go to the Broadband Adoption Affordable Connectivity Program from the California Emerging Technology Fund, Sunny McPeak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We at the California Emerging Technology Fund, it is a distinct honor to have the opportunity to serve here with all of you, and also to regularly report to the administration, to the legislature on the assignment in the Broadband Action Plan, number 16, but has now focused in on the Affordable Connectivity Program, which is a federal subsidy for affordable broadband that is in the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, $14.2 billion. The California Broadband Council, going to the next slide, to my knowledge, is the only entity in the country that has focused in and set a very aggressive goal. So in March of 2020, decided to say we are going to pursue optimizing, getting residents who are qualified onto the Affordable Connectivity Program and try to reach 90% by the end of 2024. A very aggressive goal, a very bold move by this administration and the council. And so then we launched Get Connected California Mobilization. In the Broadband for All action plan, there are assignments to those who convene: the Department of Technology, the Department of Education, the State Library, CETF, and then it says everybody else that we could actually sort of bring into the whole process. And I want to acknowledge that indeed that has happened in a very significant way, with state agencies, legislators really wanting to get to this goal. And so we were very excited to say Monday, 2 days ago, the Federal Communications Commission releases statewide enrollment numbers once a week. And that as of Monday, 2,317,780 households have been enrolled in California. And in the next slide, don't go to it yet, though, you're going to see a pretty impressive accomplishment by everybody here. In addition to that, the Federal Communication Commission out of IIJA has a grant program for promoting ACP, and 15 entities, organizations in California received grants. It was almost $6 million, and all of us who received them are now being convened under the auspices of the Department of Technology and the Office of Broadband and Digital Literacy to coordinate that effort, because we want to take every limited resource and make sure we get the biggest bang out of every buck. So going to this next slide, this is the tracker, the dashboard that Deputy Director Adams talked about, that is updated regularly with FCC information. So in California, I think it's worth noting, we have more low-income households, more poor people than any other state. California has more low-income households and poor people than any other state in the nation. We have 15% of all low-income residents in this country live in California. We're 13% of the population. So this is a very, very sobering statistic for us all to focus on. Getting to digital equity means getting everybody online. Of course, you have to have the infrastructure in order to get online. You have to have the tools. It has to be affordable. You have to have devices. You have to have digital literacy. But what is important, so you see 45% of all of our households in California are eligible. That's 5.8 million households are eligible for ACP. What we have done in that 2.3 million is get to 40%. So this is the drum roll moment, yes, Anne's doing it. This has been a huge lift. When you adopted this goal of 90%, we were at 21%. So in a period of essentially 15 months, there has been a 19 percentage point increase. Mathematically, that is a 90% increase overall in the number of households that have been enrolled. And everyone here has contributed immensely. And there are people and organizations, regional broadband consortia, CBOs throughout California listening to us today who also contributed to that. And so I think this is sort of remarkable. It's also a hallmark of accountability that we keep tracking our own progress. Going to the next slide, you will see that there was a huge amount of effort. And I want to acknowledge that it was sort of the brainchild of the Department of Technology. So Deputy Superintendent Winkler, you assigned Jeff Bello, and you guys said we should do in-person enrollment to coincide with back to school last year. And so that's exactly what happened. So the Department of Technology, Department of Education, the State Library, California State Association of Counties actually started on that process. And I will acknowledge that my colleague, Marissa Conche, has actually coordinated and led that for us. And so over the last fiscal year, there's been 75 in-person enrollment events under the Get Connected California banner and the Broadband Council. that is a huge amount of labor and organization to bring together hosts and volunteers and align everybody in terms of notification. 61 of those were on the 3 Get Connected days. Blame Jerry and his colleagues for putting us on this track. So in August on the 27th and in October on the 22nd, and then we did one on April 22nd on Earth Day because broadband is a green strategy. All of that was coordinated to best align with school schedules and not be in conflict. And then there was under Los Angeles County and the Director of Internal Services, Selwyn Hollins, another 8 Los Angeles County events that focused in on their Delete the Divide initiative. During all the workshops you've heard about, you're going to hear about more, even this afternoon, there were 3 ACP enrollment events in conjunction with workshops. And then there were 3 more under our banner that was done in the city of San Jose. There were 1,164 households actually enrolled. And then we did distribution of devices that actually had been returned to us by a school district from our 25,000 Chromebook distribution project, Chromebooks that had been purchased by Frontier Communications under their public benefits MOU a number of years ago. And with that, we were able to do from random drawings on sort of a ratio of for every 10 households enrolling in ACP that we would do a drawing for a new device. And those people receiving the device agreed to fill out a longer questionnaire so we really could understand where they are coming, what their circumstances are, how they are motivated to come on a Saturday or to an event on another day, often with family members in tow on public transit to actually enroll. And they also have agreed to be an expert advisor to Get Connected California for the next 2 years so that we are periodically consulting them to guide our work. So with all of that, going to the next slide, I think you'll find this interesting, which is everybody who comes gets what we call, well, it's an intake survey. We call it a passport. Most of them actually say they want to do the enrollment in English. You'll see in a moment, that's not the language they speak at home, but they actually are willing and want to and request doing the enrollment in English. And the circle on the other side is so important to recognize how the majority are qualifying because there are eligibility categories that if you, for example, are enrolled in the National School Lunch Program or in Medi-Cal or in CalFresh or in tribal TANF or in the Women, Infant and Children's Program or the Pell Grants, you automatically qualify for ACP. So that's an automatic qualifier. What's so important is really to see how many, if we can get to all the Medi-Cal recipients in California, which there are over 5.8 million, 8.5 million, excuse me, it's the flip, and CalFresh, that we are able to really directly communicate with folks. And herein lies where I want to acknowledge the California Department of Health Services and the Department of Social Services actually went out and in their annual notifications to the Medi-Cal recipients and to CalWorks, they're testing CalWorks before they go to CalFresh, we're able to notify people, and immediately we got the calls at our call center. More than 17,000 calls came through when the Department of Health Care Services did their notification. And we work on the premise that's been tested. That's just 20% of the people, 80%. So 4 times more than that actually enrolled themselves. That we didn't have to assist in person. And similarly, when Department of Social Services went out, we got more than 10,000 calls. And we immediately connected to CBOs who then enroll those households who need assistance for one reason or another. So kudos to all the departments. I also want to acknowledge Deputy Secretary Pepper, the cooperation of Caltrans. Caltrans builds a lot of things. They're building the middle mile, but many of the districts have really gotten engaged in being active in the digital equity space District 11 has Chris Schmidt over at Sandhag. Alice Tavery at District 7 has done a great job. So I appreciate the focus on digital equity from Caltrans and from the agency, Director Tavares and Janice Benton and Elizabeth Dewar doing a great job. Secretary Omishakin leading that with your guidance and I know support. So thank you, Lori. So go to the next slide. Let's just move on. I want to just underscore that the people we are seeing in person at these enrollment events are actually the most digitally disadvantaged. They are going to great lengths to come and enroll. And in part it's because there's an overrepresentation of families with children in school. They want a device for their child to have another access to learning or for their own use to support their child. So just looking at these statistics from the 412 that received devices, and remember, these are people who are now our expert advisors. No other state in the country has over 400 low-income households, actually the covered populations, the people with lived experiences guiding this. 75% earn less than $40,000 annually. And 75% speak a language other than English at home. Now, remember, the majority actually did their application in English. I'm always impressed with the multiple language proficiencies of the households that we get to interact with in person. 43% have no access to the internet outside of home. Many of these households are the workers we called essential workers during the pandemic, and they don't come in contact with the internet outside of home. 65% want more digital literacy training. Now that just aligns a lot with what we heard at all the workshops throughout the state. And then Deputy Superintendent Winkler, we have to really work on with the schools in the lowest income communities to make sure that the devices get home and that the parents get trained, because what that data shows is we have a lot more work to do, and you and I partner on school to homes. So we're on for that. 65% say their school-age children don't have a computing device for each student. So these are in the low income neighborhoods. Going on to the next slide. We are very, very excited about this next opportunity with the FCC grants, with all of the recipients of adoption grants from the California Advanced Services Fund. Commissioner Houck and Maria Ellis and the team at the Communications Division have allowed us to coordinate with OCBOs on ACP enrollment. We know that what works is direct notification. So the irony here now is we have 40% who are enrolled. It would be great if we could get a list from the Federal Communications Commission of the actual households that have enrolled, going back to those departments in the state that have the confidential information. We don't have to breach any confidence at all. No, breach of any HIPAA or other considerations. If we just got those names, because then we wouldn't have to communicate with 100% to reach 60. We don't want to waste 40% of our resources. So this is a big, big effort going forward. But what we know is really essential is this direct notification, as has been proven effective by the Department of Healthcare Services and Social Services. So we're going to be focusing on that. We'll continue with the resources we have and the other grantees from the FCC and CASF to do in-person enrollment. We, CETF and 11 partners with just our grant have to do 50 in-person enrollment. So that will continue as we can schedule it. And then we're going to continue working, obviously, with all of the agencies at the state level. And then through CSEC in particular, all the 58 counties who can directly notify folks. And I think that actually completes the presentation, except I want to underscore that we, out of the listening sessions and particularly the tribal consultations, so Commissioner Houck and Secretary Snyder Ashari, we really, I think, have an opportunity to accelerate the enrollment in ACP on the tribal lands. And so that's a to-do that is a new focus that we want to take very seriously and make it part of the mobilization in this next fiscal year, which we've just started. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Impressive as always, Ms. McPeak. Thank you. The statistics are sobering, both on the progress, amazing work, and still there's a lot of work to be done. So I'd like to ask if any members of the dais have any questions of Sunny McPeak. Yes, Mr. Winkler.
I just want to express our appreciation to Ms. McPeak on the work and apologize for the dates if they're inconvenient, but we're really trying to work with the school schedules and the students, and this is so important. This affordable connectivity program is so important to our students at the state, and the superintendent is behind it 100%.
They were not inconvenient. We appreciated your counsel. I just wanted to note that give you credit, even if I also gave you blame for all of the work that we had to do, but we appreciated very much the collaboration, Jerry.
Excellent. Yes, Secretary Snyder.
I also just wanted to express my appreciation. I think in going around the state with some of the joint agency tribal consultations and the BEAD outreach, it was very clear that having a lot of different representatives at the table and having Ms. McPeak with us was really helpful for tribal leaders to understand how they can outreach to their citizens. And so I think, in our community, sometimes, especially right now with both administrations at the state and federal level being so pro-tribal, and there being so many programs and so many opportunities for engagement, having those multiple touch points for tribes to engage and understand how they can and their citizens can benefit from these programs is so important. And we're starting to kind of see that. So just wanted to again express gratitude, at meeting tribes where they're at.
And we thank you for your volunteering of leadership to help convene.
Yes, Commissioner Houck.
Yeah, just also wanted to join in thanking Ms. McPeak. This is a really important program and we still have a lot of work to do. I recognize that, and wanted to thank Secretary Snyder Ashari for joining us on a number of the visits statewide and continuing to be very active in helping us on looking at tribal broadband issues. And as was noted, one of the things that came out of some of the meetings that we've recently had is that some of the tribes, particularly the tribes that are operating their own systems, there's some additional challenges for ACP for some of the tribal entities. And so to the extent we could maybe come together and start looking at how to maybe bridge that gap, and maybe that's a discussion with NTAI, but I think that was really helpful information that was gained that gives us some challenges that I think we can work through now that we understand that they're there.
Terrific. Yes.
All right. I also have a question from the remote member, Ms. Smith.
Hi, yeah. Thank you all for the update on this. And I know the ACP has been one of those things that's been a priority both inside and outside the legislature to see how we can maximize those funds. So I want to express my gratitude for all of the partners who've worked to fulfill that. And also ask for those members of the board that are working on ACP issues and outreach, has there been any discussion about how communications can be made at the federal level to advocate for continued funding? I just hate to see us do all of this work to get people on the program and then see the program run out of money in 2024, which is what they're currently expected to, or the projected end date for federal funding for the program. But I want to turn it over and ask if there's been any conversation amongst the board members about what can be done there.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. I can assure you we are all thinking about that. And from the perspective of CETF, we are very pleased to be joint venturing with the Pew Charitable Trusts, who have engaged CTF and USC, who's doing the work, surveying work for the digital equity plan, to actually continue to provide research along with our experience in California for them to take directly to to Congress and to the administration. We are also aligned with and working with the National Urban League and a coalition of stakeholders that is a red-blue strategy. So getting mobilization of a cross-section of states to weigh in for renewal or continuation of the Affordable Connectivity Program or a successor. I do think that the feedback we've had from all of the FCC commissioners, from Chair Rosenworcel through and particularly Commissioner Starks, is a really sincere, focused effort to continue the program, and they are very anxious to have support. Now, having said that, there is no substitute for the California legislature and the California governor to communicate that and reinforce that message to our delegation and to the Biden administration, which, they appear very set to want to continue as well. They obviously need to have the support of Congress, which is why having a bipartisan strategy from California and from the nation is so important.
Thank you, Ms. Smith, for your question. Is there another question?
Yeah, Director Bailey Cremens. I hope I'm not breaking protocol. I just wanted to add in response to Ms. Smith's question and kind of add to what Board Member McPeak mentioned, that one of the things that we've heard consistently over the last 2 years and in this massive engagement process over the last many months is that the ecosystem, and when we say the ecosystem, the network of local jurisdictions and schools and community-based organizations and residents themselves, is that at least from an ecosystem and the population standpoint, there's a desire for to see the Affordable Connectivity Program extended to address some of the challenges or maybe continue to improve and refine the enrollment process and eliminate some of the friction and constraints that are there for those who need it most. And then we've also heard that, that it's particularly a challenge in states like California with the high cost of living areas, where you have folks that are priced out of eligibility based on their annual income, where they would really be able to qualify. So those are things that I would just add that we learned from the digital equity and BEAD planning process that, and we're mulling through all of those, but there's a strong desire, within the state of California from the folks who need it most to see that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Yes, Mr. Aguio.
Well, I just want to commend this work. So I do agree in that these numbers are sobering, and thank you, Ms. McPeak, for all the work that you do and all the collaboration that we've had. But I do want to emphasize too on that point from the department. So numbers and results are going to help us the best. I mean, in terms of coalition building, that coalition is much stronger when we can come with results. So I do stand behind that. So I want to commend this great work, but I do want to say, if there's more work to be done, the strength is in the coalition, and that's work that we can do. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. Emphasis. I always, I'm told is people remember what we do, not what we say. So, this is what this board is doing. So very, very important. Thank you. All right. Any other questions before we go to the next agenda item? All right, agenda item 4, I will do a correction. I have the right notes now. Our next agenda item is number 4, and is for regarding the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. Basically, NTIA and its Investment, Infrastructure, Investment and Jobs Act boy, lots of words. But the two presenters that we're going to hear from, Scott Adams is going to provide an update on where we're doing in relation to digital equity. We've been up and down the state, a lot of hard work, a lot of faces here, a lot of local leaders, legislators have showed up for these events. And then we also have Maria Ellis from CPUC that will be providing an update regarding BEAD. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Director Bailey Crimmins, board members and members of the public. Glad to come and present an update on this. But before we go into the update, I did want to kind of underscore or put an exclamation point on the last section. We have very intentionally over the last year and a half presented information about the Broadband for All programs as one agenda item. And that was specific and intentional, that each of those programs are dependent on the others and that they are complementary of one another. You can't have adoption without access, and you can't have adoption without affordability. So we will continue to present these together because they are part of the overarching response to address all of the barriers and constraints that are present with our digital divide until we close that digital divide. And so as we tee up this next section, really, is directed by the action plan and by the legislature. The digital equity and BEAD programs represent the next chapters in Broadband for All. So if we could go to the first slide, I will jump in and start the update here. So first and foremost, we wanted to make sure to center our discussion and focus in our work on really those who are most impacted by the digital divide. And given that the federal government is going to be the source of funding for digital equity and BEAD efforts, they've specifically directed the state to focus investments that are developed in these plans on covered populations. And so this is a non-exhaustive list. It's not, it's prescriptive in that we have to address the needs for these covered populations, but we acknowledge there are others that the state is incredibly committed to, like the unhoused population and others. So we're not limiting our focus just on these, but we are wanting to individuals in covered households that are below 150% of the federal poverty level, aging individuals over 60, justice involved individuals, veterans, individuals with disabilities, folks with language barriers, which includes low levels of literacy, individuals that primarily reside in rural areas. And then you'll see that the two boxes in the right corner are in a slightly different shade. That's because digital equity and BEAD are driven by two different kind of sections of language, and the notice of funding opportunities that determine how these plans are developed have some slightly different focus. And so women and those who identify as female and members of the LGBTQI+ community are here because they're specifically called out in the BEAD program as folks who are historically underrepresented in broadband jobs. And so in partnership with PUC, we've been taking care to focus on all of our work around these covered populations. So if we could go to the next slide, please. What we wanted to really focus on is remind people we've gone through this period of massive engagement now, but we're just about to do our last, when I say last, it's just for now, engagement with our tribal collaboration meeting on Friday. But really we're in data analysis mode and producing the digital equity plan. And so knowing that the digital equity plan, what the federal government's looking for us is to further hone and refine our vision, goals, and objectives for digital equity. A lot of those have already been outlined in the Broadband for All Action Plan and Senate Bill 156 and the other work that's already ongoing. Really outline the processes for engagement, create some measurable objectives, develop a needs assessment, really demonstrate that we've worked to understand both the common barriers for the covered populations, but the specific and unique barriers that might exist with those folks. Develop strategies to overcome those barriers that actually tie to policy outcomes of importance to the state, like education, like healthcare access, digital inclusion, workforce and economic development, access to essential services and government benefit programs, and particularly continuing to collaborate with our tribal nation partners to focus on achieving connectivity where our assistance is and partnership is desired. What we really wanted to show is that, well, I guess there's one piece we need to, I'm not going to go through all the components, but I will say that lastly, what we're going to have to identify is how we intend to leverage capacity grant dollars to implement our plan, and how we're going to leverage other sources of funding, because there may not be enough grant dollars that come down through the capacity grants to implement the plan. But when you go from the left side of the page to the blue arrow to the orange side of the page, that's really the goal line, like complete the plan and then get the capacity grants from the federal government to implement the plan. And wanted to really focus, we talked a lot about infrastructure and how, the middle miles funded, by billions of dollars, and the billions of dollars of last mile infrastructure grant programs that the PUC is administrating. A lot of the eligible uses for capacity grants are going to be those things that we've called out and we're working on, but haven't necessarily already been funded or funded to the extent that they need to be to get to the finish line. So things like continue to expand the broadband adoption efforts and ACP, developing more availability of digital literacy trainings, digital navigation program. AB 2750 specifically asks us to do an inventory of digital navigation programs in the state. And something that's really interesting that's come up in all of this is that we've been looking at the digital navigation as it relates to like community-based organizations providing assistance to residents. What we've also heard is that there is a potential need for a similar digital navigation program for entities and organizations. So, tribal nations, towns, counties, other municipalities that could augment existing efforts that are going on at the CPUC, et cetera, and then device distribution and workforce training. So this is kind of where we're headed next over the next couple months to get to a draft digital equity plan. Next slide, please. What we did want to say is this slide really represents just how much you've heard the council members talk about the tremendous amount of engagement that has been going on over the last many months. And I would say the last 2.5 years, quite frankly, because it began with the executive order and the action plan, and then really the coordination on Senate Bill 156 and middle and last mile ACP promotion. I won't read all of these, but in the upper left-hand corner, you see we did have our Broadband for All Digital Equity and BEAD kickoff that was in October of last year. We've established a statewide planning group that is an extension of the member entities of this group, and we've added 12 additional agencies that have connection to the covered populations or subject matter expertise to the policy outcomes that the digital equity plan will create. We've created 6 outcome area working groups, conducted multiple resident surveys and organizational surveys, conducted regional workshops, tribal consultations, email updates, and media placements. And like I said, we created this digital equity network of stakeholder inclusion advocates collectively that now represents over 5,000 vested, interested parties in the state of California. Next slide. Thank you. And so what we wanted to do is quantify for you what all of this effort means. The goal of, or the direction from the NTIA and the planning grant is that the digital equity plan should incorporate the lived and community experiences of the state's population. And in a state like ours, 167,000 square miles, almost 40 million residents, it's really hard with the $4 million planning grant and, a year to do that. But through the process that we've been able to develop, we're pleased to say that we've created the opportunity to bring in the voices of over 50,000 California residents through participating in the summits, through participation in the working groups, attending, the statewide planning group meetings, and then responses. We've had 40,000 responses from an online mobile phone friendly survey that we've developed that is, I think, is probably, the largest response that any state has gotten in the process, and then enabled, really close collaboration and bi-directional planning at these regional planning workshops that we've conducted. So next slide, please. So here's, as Director Bailey Crimmins always tells me, images always speak louder than words. And so we already said it. I don't think, that most state efforts are prepared to deploy and around the state as quickly and extensively as this group of partners have. But really, thanks to the very close coordination with the Public Utilities Commission and CETF that was contracted to play a lead role in putting these together, GoBiz, Caltrans, CalSTA, other state agencies, the Department of Education, the Office of Tribal Affairs. We conducted 17 Broadband for All digital equity and BEAD regional planning workshops in every economic region in the state over the last 4 months. And pretty significant when you add that we did 3 group tribal consultations as part of that, really got out there and to parallel consistency is something that, Sunny is always, telling our team and our staff as we're working together. The focus of these workshops was to really underscore that Broadband for All has already been in place. There are investments that are and efforts that are ongoing, like the Middle Mile and the PUC suite of last mile programs, and then the ACP mobilization to help us center the conversation on how can we collectively get local and regional input from residents and stakeholders about how we're going to leverage this next batch of money for BEAD and digital equity to fill gaps. And so to not duplicate, to fill gaps, and to support creative and innovative ideas that are community and constituent specific. And then we had an infrastructure planning workshop, but still even better than this, I'd like to go to the next segment, and courtesy of the San Joaquin Valley Broadband Consortia and the folks at CSU Fresno, who were co-conveners of 2 of the Central Valley events, they produced a short video of the event we held in Fresno that really kind of demonstrates what these events were all about. So I would love to have the staff cue up the videos so we could share that with the board and the members of the public.
Fortunately, we all live in a state that has been thinking about broadband for many years and has just needed some additional tools to make sure there is broadband for all. So we are very excited to partner with California and each of the counties across the state, because so many of you have been working on this and saying there's an issue for a while. But now's the time, to really take your knowledge, take your experiences, and turn them into a plan that results in actual broadband, in actual training.
We have imminent need here, and even though we're one of the most progressive states in the country, there are still huge disparities in some of our rural communities in the Central Valley.
Affordability impacts all of us. It impacts adoption, and we have students doing homework in their cars. We have students doing homework on the city bus because that's where broadband is, because they don't have broadband in their home, and yet they live in Fresno, and everybody thinks Fresno's covered. It's not. I have students who live in Avenel, and we gave them a Wi-Fi, but it doesn't make a difference because there's no connectivity out there.
One of the ways is by trying to expand the universe of broadband providers. So we're not just relying solely on internet service providers. We're trying to empower counties, empower cities, empower joint powers authority, empower tribes to bring broadband to those places that have been ignored.
So all of us need to work together to make sure that folks in Fresno, the surrounding communities, and the region know about this program and are able to connect to it.
Can we please bring the slides back up? And I want to be mindful of time, so I'll
Additional tools.
get
to
through the
make
rest of the
sure
content so we
there
can get
is
over to.
broadband for all. So,
Got it. So that really gives you an idea about the work group. So I did want to underscore that a critical part of the process has been establishing the outcome area working groups that were specifically intended to bring subject matter experts together to identify barriers within their kind of matrix focus and help develop strategies to empower outcomes. These are the 6 working groups that we've established, and we will conclude the final one, as I said, on Friday, which is the Tribal Collaboration Working Group. If we could go to the next slide. So again, partnered with CETF to expand their historic digital equity survey to really expand the sample size. This is a scientific phone survey done in partnership with USC Annenberg School to really get a pulse of what's going on throughout the state. I'm not going to go through all of this, and we'll share the slides, but yielding great data. And a real focus this year is historically the survey is a 1,600 sample size. We wanted to double that sample and kind of do 2 different sets that oversampled rural populations and folks with disabilities. And so we've been working with the Department of Rehabilitation to get a better understanding of constraints and barriers through the phone survey. If we go to the next slide, please. Additionally, again, the mission of the digital equity planning process was to engage and BEAD process was to engage as many voices across the state as possible. And so, we wanted to do what we could to allow for as many voices to be heard as possible. So we developed an online mobile phone friendly survey in partnership with a number of entities throughout the ecosystem, and been able to generate 40,000 responses, which is incredibly significant. And it may be hard for some folks to see, but you see a table on the upper right that shows the amount of responses we've been able to get from folks who have self-identified as members of the covered populations. And given the accessibility features, this survey took a little bit longer to build, but it was translated and is available in 14 different languages. And audio files were created for the survey in each of those languages for every question. So if a person with sight impairment or low level of literacy were taking it, they could still complete that survey. And honestly, I'm going to say there's a lot of people to thank here, but the Communication Workers of America were initial mover and sent out a text to a significant database that they had. The Association of Retired Folks, AARP, has been just an amazing partner here. And you'll see that we got responses from 20,000 residents that are 60 or older. And then an additional call out, two other call outs would be to the rural county representatives of California. If you were to see this, we had talked through with their leadership. Barbara Hayes there is committed to making sure their voices were heard. Each of the counties has generated tremendous response. So there's great spread throughout the state. And then lastly, the San Diego Area Association of Governments in the County of San Diego got, really creative and wanted to make sure that they got as much response as they could. So they sent a text out in English and Spanish to all of their services eligible residents and ended up generating 12,000 responses in like 3 days, which not only is good for them to be able to, because we can take the data and aggregate it and use it to develop the digital equity plan, but now they can use that data to help inform their digital equity efforts. So can all the other areas that, have generated enough to actually, draw some conclusions. So that's an important point, and it's one to carry over to the Affordable Connectivity Program. Because when you look at, our ability, there's a lot of folks. The primary reason people aren't signing up for ACP is because they don't know about it. So working with trusted messengers to text, simple messages, service eligible population is a great way to increase enrollment in that program. Next slide, please. Another critical tool for us, we're supposed to develop a comprehensive asset inventory of the state ecosystem. So Broadband Equity Partnership, who's our consultant and thought partner, developed a digital ecosystem mapping tool, one for government organizations, schools, libraries, and CBOs, one for ISPs, and able to get a tremendous amount of response from a lot of different folks about the ongoing work that they are doing, the funding they're leveraging, and how that can be supported to empower implementation of the digital equity plan. I think you'll find that the responses are also telling a story that, that no surprise, there's a lot of response in the urban populated areas that have well-resourced entities that are already doing this work. But when you move out into the more rural areas, there's potentially less capacity and less folks that are doing this work. Next slide. So just next steps for you all, because I know immediately after this meeting, we're going to take a half-hour break and we're going to do the statewide planning group, where we're going to really go a lot deeper into the high-level information that I just shared with you. We have our tribal collaboration outcome area working group on Friday, planning on a draft digital equity plan and public comment period late summer, early fall. Final digital equity plan to the NTIA by the end of by Q4. Our statutory deadline is defined by AB 2750. The Bonta bill is by January 1st, 2024. And then we expect the capacity grant notice of funding opportunity to come out early first quarter of next year. So Director Bailey Crimmins, I turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much. And we'll go ahead and turn it right over back to Ms. Ellis, who will give a last mile update, and then we'll open it up for questions after her part of the presentation.
Thank you, Director Bailey Crimmins and council members. Again, my name is Maria Ellis. I'm the Deputy Director for Broadband at the California Public Utilities Commission. Want to take this opportunity to just give an update on another really significant opportunity to achieve our goals under Broadband for All. In late June, the NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, announced that California was going to be allocated $1.86 billion in federal funding for the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, otherwise known as BEAD. This is yet another really significant tool for the state to bring to bear in closing the digital divide and providing last mile connections to all Californians. The primary goal of the BEAD program is to deploy reliable last mile service to unserved locations. And for the purpose of this program, unserved means those locations that lack access to speeds at least 25 megabits per second download and 3 upload via a reliable technology. And again, for the purposes of this program, it's generally defined by federal rules as fiber or advanced cable wireline connection. Where that is not feasible, fixed wireless and other technologies can be considered. The CPUC is moving forward with establishing program rules through a public deliberative process. We've closed the comment period for that, but there's more to come and more opportunities to get engaged. Next slide, please. So we've got a number of upcoming milestones for this program that to make you aware of. We are, as Scott talked about, we are just wrapped up our initial wave of public engagements in partnership with CDT. Through that process that included 17 public general events and 4 regional tribal consultations and 1 statewide. We have actually also received requests from an additional 26 tribes, I believe, to have one-on-one consultations following up. So that's wonderful. We would always welcome the opportunity to continue to engage with tribes on a one-on-one basis as we are developing this program. We will continue to coordinate with CDT on outreach and planning for digital equity BEAD, and they're just such an important partnership in this space. Also notable is that we just released the 5-year action plan for public comment on July 17th and are accepting initial comments through July 7th and reply comments through August 7th and reply comments by August 11th. This plan is really a high-level sketch that maps out some of our tools and assets and helps us understand kind of what is at our disposal in terms of developing the BEAD program. The 5-year action plan doesn't include issues related to rules and guidelines of how we're setting up the program. That will all be wrapped up later into what is called the initial proposal, which is due later this year in December. The public comments that we receive as part of the action plan, we are taking, will be incorporated into the record through ruling. So just know that all of that will be forwarded on to NTIA and will be considered as part of the initial proposal planning. From here through August, we'll be spending time working on that initial proposal, like I said, which will include the draft rules for BEAD and outline of the challenge process and subgrantee selection process. This initial proposal we will be engaging with a wide set of stakeholders both through public participation hearings and technical workshops, and then also it will be posted for public comment before it is submitted to NTIA. The initial plan, as mentioned, will be due to the initial proposal, will be due to NTIA in December at the end of the year. And then once we submit that, we'll continue doing engagement, but we anticipate that NTIA will approve or provide feedback on that initial proposal, which will sometime in early 2024, and that will allow us to start the challenge process. And then thereafter starting the solicitation for applications and the selection of proposed subgrantees. When we receive approval for the initial proposal, it really starts the clock, a 365-day clock. And what that means is that we have 1 year to then submit our final proposal to NTIA. And that final proposal will have a list of all our proposed the results really of our challenge process and our solicitation process, and will include the list of all awardees. So this will, that final proposal will also be put out for public comment. So that's a very high level snapshot of where we're at and some of the next big milestones that are coming up. That's it from me.
Thank you, Ms. Willis. We'll go ahead and open up to the questions for either Mr. Adams and or Ms. Ellis, if you have any questions. Ms. McPeak?
Madam Chair, I'd like to sort of begin by just adding an observation about this whole process. I'm really glad to be at the end of it. I mean, a lot of effort went into planning it, but there were 20 workshops done in less than 3 months. So when they started happening, they happened fast. And we were in the middle of helping support the state agencies. And so perhaps, you know, that's a lens through which I'm going to make these comments, but we do have great partners throughout the state who stepped up as planning partners and who did an immense amount of work and really out through their networks gathered people. What I saw that I wanted to really share with you that I think is it is palpable, but you would be hard to actually have speculated on this outcome, and that is such collaboration and camaraderie that emerged from everybody in the room, and that the planning partners and the participants were so impressed with all of the state agencies that were there, who literally many mornings I'd be walking in at 7 a.m. with my team in an absolute empty, like, veterans hall, with having to start setting up all of the stuff. And when Anne arrived, when Maria arrived, when Scott arrived, you know, Laura, Cole, everybody started helping. GoBiz was at every one of them, and Jolia and her team would walk in and they would start collating, they would start distributing. It was really a lot of joint effort. That, as you said, people remember what we do, not what we say. That got observed. And then, as I shared with Deputy Secretary Pepper, these events were over 6 hours. The core workshop went for 3, and then you have to feed people in between. And then there would be a workshop on deployment. You know, Mark showed up, and so the department, Middle Mile and Golden State would be there along with the PUC on the last mile. And I mean, people would still be standing talking at 6 o'clock on a Friday night in many of these places when the traffic was, you know, they knew the traffic was just going to be impossible, but they were so appreciative of having the opportunity to be there to interact with all of you. And then the department turned around very quickly the results of these workshops and got them out usually within 48 hours once we got started. And then these are products that everybody has to share and do more conversation in their own workshop. I did lean over to Deputy Director, Chief Deputy Director. I always have to remember these titles. I've never been in a group that is so formal with all the titles as this, you know. I have to just acknowledge that too, and said to Chief Deputy Director Osborne, it was literally a death march up and down the state. That's how I felt we were doing, although it didn't feel that way to the participants. They really, really loved it. And she said, yes, they, you know, DGS even contributed a van, which Deputy Secretary Stuart Drown drove around the state. You know, it was like this Digital Equity Express, and some of you have your photos in front of it. Really a hoot, and bringing together in a way that you have to be very pleased with the way that the Scott and team and Maria and team actually pulled all this together to show it's the California family.
Thank you, Ms. McPeak. And I would say, obviously, I would second that. The other piece that really just touched me was the testimonials. I think everyone would agree that attended any of them. I mean, surveys, and I'm a data person, so that's all important, but hearing it from an individual of really what it means to them really brought it home for me. And I think that was, it really showed that they, like you were saying, they were committed. They came out, they, you know, drove many hours in some circumstances, and they wanted to make sure that that their local officials and the state were completely aware of, you know, what it meant. And when we talk about unprecedented investment, it really is. And at the end of the day, what matters is people matter, and people matter because we get it in their hands. So So thank you for everyone here that, again, has been a part of this whole journey, because we were road warriors together, right? Like you said. I'd like to open it up to the dais. Is there any other questions or comments from anyone before we go to the remote members? Commissioner Hauk.
Yeah, just also want to, again, I think for the fourth time, reiterate how much work was done. I wasn't able to attend all 17 of the general community engagements, but I did go to 5. I went to the one in Tuolumne, one in LA, one in San Diego, the one in Sacramento, and Reading, yes. That I tried to do a mix of urban, rural, and then I went to the 3 regional tribal consultations. And I think it's really important to get out there. And it was really impressive to see firsthand that every one of those, the rooms were full. And I understand that was the case for pretty much all 17. So that says a lot. And there's also been follow-up conversations that were instigated through those community engagements. So those were just the beginning of the engagements. And so there's still a lot of work to do, but it is really important to go out, as you were saying, and hear from the individuals how this is affecting them. And it is a lot of work, especially coming out of the pandemic where we're not used to getting out and being in person with people. But I think it's really important, and it gives you a whole different level of understanding of what's happening, especially for folks that aren't connected and don't have access to get online and do what we've all been doing for the last 3 years.
Thank you, Commissioner Hauk. Any other questions or comments from the dais? All right, see none. Anything from the remote members? Okay, we're going to go ahead and Mr. Adams?
Yeah, I wanted to just add on a statement that Councilmember McPeak said, because it's like, I think we're really encouraged by the work that the state agencies and departments are doing on Broadband for All and digital equity and BEAD planning, and is, Sunny reminded us all that this takes the giant village that you were referencing, and there are every one of the regional broadband consortia was a planning partner in this and have been doing a ton of work previously to achieve broadband for all. The metropolitan planning organizations, the local jurisdictions, the community-based organizations, the folks like Oakland Undivided, and other folks that participated, the San Francisco Mayor's Office. There's a ton of partners that help in the planning in the, of the work, but also we're doing the implementation of the work that in many ways, our programs are supporting. So, but big shout out and kudos to them, because they're not just the critical partners. In many ways, they're the drivers of the work we're all doing.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. All right, we're going to go ahead and shift to public comment. Mrs. Saki, if you could please provide housekeeping and public comment guidelines.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as we move into the public comment phase of this, just a reminder to everyone who wishes to comment, we want to give everyone the ability to do so. But we respectfully request that there is 1 person per entity and 2 minutes per speaker for public comment. The order that we will go through public comment is in person, so here in the room, and then we will go to Zoom. So you will want to use the raise hand function on Zoom if you wish to comment from Zoom. We will also accept raised hands via phone on Zoom. So that is *9, and it will show up as raising your hand. We will also check to see if there are any online submissions via email prior to the meeting. So I would like to start with any in-person members of the public for public comment.
Hello, my name is Patrick Messick, and I'm the director of Oakland Undivided. I'm here today to advocate alongside the communities where nearly 3/4 of California's disconnected residents reside. Historically redlined Black and brown urban communities that, like Oakland, have been bypassed for public and private infrastructure investment for decades. If this once-in-a-generation broadband infrastructure investment is going to be different, we need your help now. The $2 billion last mile window opened this month, and $3.25 billion in middle mile build is underway. Absent your urgent intervention, inaccurate and inequitable maps will perpetuate divestment in Black and Brown communities statewide. You don't need to take my word for it. Simply Google California Interactive Broadband Map and look at the map yourself. Look at the FFA public map and you'll see it for yourself. I know all of you don't have computers in front of you today, so I just want to quickly show you what I'm talking about. The digital divide is not evenly distributed throughout California. It's not evenly distributed throughout Alameda County. In Alameda County, it's predominantly in 3 neighborhoods: West Oakland, Fruitvale, and Deep East Oakland. When we heard about this generational investment, these are the communities that need it the most. So you'll imagine our surprise when we pulled up the California broadband maps and saw that in communities where the majority of houses were built around World War II, and the CPU's own findings have found that private industry does not invest in these communities, only a sparse peppering of unserved locations. This certainly isn't accurate, and it's certainly not equitable, but at least potentially there's equality. So I turned and zoomed around the map and looked at the other 2 wealthiest communities in Alameda County that were previously prioritized in the much maligned California priority map. And here's what I saw. All across the region, dense clusters of reportedly unserved locations. So what did I do? I zoomed in, I found out what the addresses were, and time and again, these locations are served, demonstrably served. I'm happy to share this slide deck with you afterwards, but by the state's own data, they have gigabit speed available in these unserved clusters. This is true on the interactive map and the FFA map. I validated this by going on Comcast's address lookup tool, and it says you actively have an account at this address. 2 gigs are available in this neighborhood. Median income here is $171,000. Do we really think that this location would be unserved? Example after example, the 10 largest clusters of unserved communities on these maps are all demonstrably served. These are the communities that are going to get all the funding. And it's not just Pleasanton, the wealthiest community in our county. Also Livermore, the 2nd wealthiest neighborhood in our community. All of these communities are demonstrably served, and these are the communities that we're planning on investing in. This isn't some hypothetical scenario. With the MMAC optimization process of the middle mile map, where they made about 17% of cuts, Oakland lost over 60% of our planned segments, a $9 million divestment in Oakland because they relied on these maps. In all last mile funding, the $24 million coming to Alameda County, all of Oakland's flatlands are only eligible for an estimated subsidy of around $1 million. The time to act is now, and I need you to pull up those maps to see it for yourself, and please do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you for the public comment. Do we have anybody else in the audit boardroom that wants to make a public comment? I see none. Is there anybody online, Ms.?
Yes, we do have individuals online. So our first is Lily Genghis.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity to address you all today. My name is Lily Beth Genghis. I'm the Chief Tech Community Officer of the Caper Foundation, a foundation focused on creating equitable tech pathways for our community, and we are based in Oakland, California. And today I speak on behalf of what you just saw, the inequities that we're seeing through these maps that are really reflecting in what we call a digital discrimination. As somebody who has also my own personal time being the Oakland Redistricting Commissioner, I have seen and studied the redlining history of Oakland and the fact that the cuts that are being made on the middle mile are resulting in an estimated $9 million divestment in Oakland's biggest gaps of equity, as you just saw from your own maps, is unacceptable. And so I'm here to make sure that we ask you to make the right decision, because this is not just about having fast enough internet. This is about having access to digital rights, which we know are civil rights. And as somebody who lives here, owns here, has benefited from the tech opportunities that the tech can provide, you are robbing multi-generations of not just access to education, but pathways into the digital economy. You are robbing elders of fair and equitable healthcare through telemedicine. You're robbing a lot of people of potential opportunities by divesting in these areas that you leveraging the same maps that you're all providing are causing. So I hope that you can please address it. This is a once in a lifetime investment for this generation. I have worked at the federal level, at the national level, at city levels. I've been traveling to different states and seeing the inequities that just keep coming through, and especially here in our area in California, in Oakland, where we are less than 7 miles away from Silicon Valley, the home of the AI revolution as we're seeing it. This is going to be just unacceptable, and it's literally violating civil rights, because digital rights are civil rights. So I hope that you can please make the amendments as needed and make sure that you provide the opportunity to increase more funding for the communities and not be able to cut down the needed investment that's needed. The middle mile that you announced from your last map cuts about 17% of the investment that's going there, and the folks who are going to keep getting hurt the most are going to be the folks in West Oakland, Food Belt, and West Oakland and East Oakland. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lily. We're going to go next to Philip Neufeld. And Phil, I want to acknowledge that you did submit an email to the Broadband Council email. So if you want to either recap that or make other comments, please feel free. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. I'm Philip Neufeld, Executive Officer of IT at Fresno Unified School District and co-founder of the Fresno Coalition for Digital Inclusion. Thank you to all who are moving this really important work in California to ensure broadband for all. We learned during the pandemic the substantial gaps in internet infrastructure, how internet providers choose not to adequately serve areas of higher poverty, and the large number of unserved residents in urban and rural areas of poverty who do not yet show up on the state's broadband maps. For example, the CPUC map suggests Fresno County has around 3% of its residents who are unserved, yet the 2020 American Community Survey showed 70% unserved, and the Microsoft Digital Equity Dashboard showed around 50% unserved in Fresno County, a county with 1 million residents. Our 11 million My Quality of Internet speed tests that Fresno Unified ran showed 27% of the city of Fresno is unserved. These areas of digital and disinvestment affect vulnerable populations and traditionally marginalized communities. Barring these residents from participation in services like telehealth, online education, job searches, and so much more, we have learned that many unserved residents live in multi-dwelling units. Yet these residents, about 30% of our population, are not counted as unserved. So we urge the CPUC to prioritize infrastructure investments in multi-dwelling units, especially within the broadband plan, and increase that prioritization perhaps right below unserved. We urge improvements to the broadband map to more equitably guide infrastructure investments. And our anchor institutions, similar to what we have done, can offer the CPUC ways to improve those maps to better guide our ongoing investments. This is not a 1 year, 2 year deal to erase the digital and disinvestment that's happened over the last 20 years. We've all got to lean in for the next 5 to 10 years to make sure that all Californians can participate in broadband and in modern society. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Madam Chair, I'm also going to open it up to anyone who has dialed in. Please enter *9 if you want to raise your hand. We'll keep an eye out for that. All right, seeing none, I'm going to go back through one more time just to ensure that we don't have anyone else in the room who wants to comment. I don't see anyone. Last chance for Zoom hands for public comment. All right, seeing none, there are no additional comments that have been submitted via email. And one more time, if anyone who has dialed in wishes to enter *9 to raise their hand, please do so. Madam Chair, I believe that that concludes our public comment.
Thank you very much. I want to thank council members, presenters, attendees, and public for their contributions today. I also want to express my gratitude for all of us that are working diligently to move things forward because your work is greatly valued. And that is this only together can we actually deliver broadband for all. Our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, October 25th, 2023 from 9:30 to 11:30. And of course, we look forward to seeing everyone then. And with that, we will conclude the July 26, 2023 California Broadband Council.